Welcome to 5-Minute Knowledge Channel. Today, we learned about the topic of the Six-Day War in 1967. The Six-Day War is also known as the Israel-Arab War. This is a war between Israel and a coalition of Arab countries with their allies. Initially, when comparing forces, everyone thought that the allies would overwhelm Israel. But thanks to wise decisions and the spirit of fighting to the death, Israel created one of the fastest and most glorious victories in the history of modern warfare. Since the Suez Crisis in 1956, Egypt, Syria, and Israel have signed a ceasefire agreement but have continued to strengthen their fighting power by purchasing more weapons. While Arab countries buy weapons from Czechoslovakia and the Soviet Union, Israel buys weapons from Western countries, mainly the US and UK. Since the 1956 war, Egypt has agreed to allow the United Nations to deploy peacekeeping forces in the Sinai and prevent Palestinian guerrillas from infiltrating and sabotaging Israel. Egypt also agreed to open the Strait of Tiran to Israeli ships. As a result, the border between Egypt and Israel was stabilized in the period. However, on May 16, 1967, the commander of the United Nations forces received a letter from the Arab coalition asking them to withdraw their troops from Sinai. Next, Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser ordered the remilitarization of the Sinai region, concentrating tank troops along the Israeli border. On May 25, 1967, Egypt announced the closure of the Tiran Strait to Israel flagged ships. Israel has appealed to the West for help. British Prime Minister at the time, Harold Wilson, proposed to send an international navy to resolve the crisis, but the call received little support from the international community. Only the Netherlands offered naval support to this force, so Israel realized that only itself could be saved. On May 23, 1967, the Israeli cabinet met and decided to attack Egypt if the Strait of Tiran was not reopened by May 25. Then the US called for negotiations. Israel delayed 10 to 15 days. The United Nations Secretary General U Thant also arrived in Egypt for meetings and the resumption of diplomatic activities. However, Israel realized that Egypt was only buying time to consolidate its troops, so the Israeli cabinet refused to negotiate. On June 1, 1967, General Moshe Dayan was appointed Defense Minister of Israel, and Israel formed a unified cabinet with the participation of opposition parties. In the 2 weeks before the war, Israel mobilized all male citizens between the ages of 18 and 55 who were ordered to be ready for military service. On the evening of the June 1, 1967, Israel's defense minister contacted the chief of staff, Yitzhak Rabin, to submit a plan to attack Egypt, avoiding simultaneous confrontation with Syria. On June 5, 1967, the Israeli Air Force preemptively attacked the Arab Air Force with the focus of the plan to carry out surprise raids, bomb the runway, and destroy aircraft parts on the ground. The Six-Day War officially begins. The Israeli plane circled the Mediterranean before rounding out to Egypt. The journey takes 45 minutes. A Jordanian radar detected it and sent an alert to Egypt. However, Egypt was unable to decode the telegram. In addition, Egypt's air defense base is very poor and their soldiers are very subjective. Even more unlucky for Egypt when that day the Vice President, Marshal, and Defense Minister and many other senior officers had an inspection trip to Sinai. But soon they were back in Cairo. The Israeli pilots combined many tactics at the same time. The attack was successful beyond imagination. It took Egypt completely by surprise and destroyed most of the Egyptian Air Force on the ground. More than 300 aircraft were destroyed and more than 100 pilots died. Israel only lost about 19 aircraft, mostly due to accidents and technical problems. The Israeli Air Force moved to attack the air forces of Jordan, Syria, and Iraq and destroy most of the air forces of these countries. After 2 days, the whole world thought Israel was spreading fake news when they announced that they had destroyed 416 Arab planes, while they only lost 216 planes. During the following days, Israeli aircraft continued to bombard the runways to prevent them from reoperating. After the victory over the Air Force, Israel used infantry and tanks to advance to the Egyptian border. The first day of the fierce fighting, Israel advanced several tens of kilometers into Egyptian territory. The second day of fighting on the Sinai front brought a new defeat for Egypt. With air support, the Israeli infantry pushed deep into the Sinai, and Egypt's force began to withdraw. By the end of the day, Israel had occupied the entire Gaza Strip and pushed the rest of the Egyptian army to the Gulf of Suez. The victory allowed Israel to send troops to the West Bank and Jerusalem to fight Jordan. On the afternoon of June 6, Israel captured the cities of Hebron and Bethlehem. The Syrian army counterattacked in the Golan Heights, but was repelled by the Israeli border troops. On the same day, the United Nations Security Council met. The U.S. proposed to establish an emergency peace, and the militaries of all countries returned to position before the war. However, the Soviet Union still hoped that the Arab army could survive, so they vetoed this proposal. Entering the third day of the war, Israel almost defeated Egypt in the Sinai Peninsula. The Arab army in Jerusalem surrendered. On June 8, the Egyptian army completely failed. They wanted a peace agreement. Defeating Egypt and Jordan, Israel focused on attacking Syria. After a few hours, when Syria accepted to sign the United Nations Peace Treaty, Israeli planes are still bombing Syria, attacking the Golan Heights. However, due to concerns about Soviet intervention, Israel stopped attacking. On the afternoon of June 11th, the peace agreement took effect and the Six-Day War ended. After the ceasefire was signed, Israel captured the Gaza Strip, the Sinai Peninsula, the west coast of Jordan River, and the Golan Heights. The overall territory of Israel is 3 times larger. Losses on both sides. Israel's losses were much lower than previously predicted. 800 soldiers died, 2,563 wounded, and 46 planes destroyed. At the end of the war, Israel also obtained abundant spoils, a large amount of weapons such as AK-47, AKM, BKM. The Arab losses were terrible. Among them, Egypt suffered the most. About 10,000 troops and 1,500 officials died, 20,000 troops wounded, 6,000 troops missed, deserted or captured. Jordan has 700 soldiers killed and about 2,500 troops wounded. Syria has 2,500 troops killed and 5,000 troops wounded. About 6,000 Arabs were taken prisoner and 400 planes were destroyed. Thank you for watching the video. Remember to like, share and subscribe to the channel.